Hey everyone, James Lynch here doing a quick reaction video to the news that Jiri Prochazka will be taking on Jamahal Hill at UFC 311. This was announced during the UFC Macau post-fight show, but we kind of knew this fight was going to happen, right? There was the video that Jamahal Hill did a few months ago talking about his next bout being signed. He does the samurai sign at the end. It looked pretty obvious he was going to be fighting Jiri. I don't know what took so long to announce this fight, but this is a great matchup. Both fighters obviously losing to Alex Pereira. I'm going to give my initial thoughts on the fight being put together. I'll give you my early prediction, but this will not be my official pick yet. I always do the early look show where I dive deep into the stats, but I do kind of have an idea how I think this fight will go. But first, let me just talk about the Instagram video that Jiri posted and then Jamal's response to it. I know a lot of people don't like Jamahal Hill. This was very well done. Watch this video here with Jiri talking about the fight being confirmed and Jamal's reaction.
I'm coming!
Where you at, though? And by the way, that's what she said. That's what she said!
I'm coming.
Anyways, you get the idea. That was well played by Jamal. I got to give him credit for that. I know some people will call it cringe. I thought it was pretty funny. Anyways, let's look at the quick tail of the tape between these two. And we'll kind of dig into this fight a little bit more. Big fight for the division. So, first and foremost, this fight is a 3-round fight. It's not 5 rounds. It should be 5 rounds, in my opinion. This is the type of fight that does have potential implications, especially if Jamal wins, of getting back in the title picture. I think this should be a 5-round fight. I don't see why they can't do it. I know it's on the pay-per-view, but yeah, I think this should be 5. Second thing we got to note is that Jiri not moving down to 185. There's some rumors about him possibly dropping weight classes. I even, mentioned that possibility as well about how he would do in that weight class. I don't think that is a good move for Jiri right now, even though he's lost twice to the current champ right now. I mean, Pereira could move up. Pereira could retire in a few years. There is a possibility of Jiri still getting a title shot at some point. So again, that's sort of the context. And obviously Jamal looking to bounce back after that loss to Pereira as well. Okay, so 35-1 for Jamahal Hill, or for Jiri Prochazka, who's got more experience than Jamahal Hill, who only has 14 fights. 32 years old for Jiri, 33 for Hill. Actually kind of forgot that Hill's like a little bit older, not by much, but they're pretty much the same age. And height and reach-wise, this was another thing that surprised me. They're pretty similar. 6'3" to 6'4", Jamal with the height advantage. 80-inch reach to 79, Jiri with the reach advantage. So you're getting two guys that are very similar and have had interesting paths, both of them, to getting a UFC title. They both won UFC titles, obviously. So for Jiri, came over from Rizin, fights Volkan Ozdemir in a fight which, was actually kind of back and forth, and then he finishes Ozdemir in the second round, beats Dominic Reyes in the second round in a fight that he was actually knocked out in, comes back like from the dead, like the Undertaker, and ends up finishing Reyes in the second round, and then he gets the title shot against Glover. It's interesting, and it's kind of funny looking back now, and granted that was back in 2021. A lot of people weren't complaining about that back then. I mean, there was a few critics, obviously, but you look at now with all the different title shots that are being rewarded, this would get absolutely crucified, I think, if this had happened in 2024. So it's kind of interesting looking back. And we know what happened there. Glover was on his way to winning that fight. Jiri ends up getting the 5th round submission, beats him, wins the title. And then he was supposed to fight Glover again in the rematch. He ends up getting that brutal shoulder injury. That's where he was training in Vegas. In steps in the interim, or the vacant fight between Pereira and who was it again? Pereira and someone. It was Pereira and who did Pereira end up fighting? Oh yeah, it was Jamal. Sorry, Jamal. It was Jamahal Hill and Glover Teixeira ended up fighting. That's what it was. I'm getting my timelines mixed up. So then he comes back to try and get his title at UFC 295. Right, that was the title fight. Yeah, that was for the vacant title when Jamahal Hill was out. Sorry, it's hard to keep track here. And then obviously Jiri loses that fight to Pereira. Ends up fighting him just 2 fights later, ends up losing again. So Jiri now loser of 2 of his last 3 fights. Even the Rakic fight fairly even until he was able to finish Rakic in that second round. So we'll see what Jiri can do. The one thing with Jiri that's, a bit of an X factor here is that he's only been knocked out by one guy in the UFC. I know he was knocked out years ago in Rizin, but in general, he's been shown to be pretty tough to finish. Like I said, Reyes, couldn't keep him down, and Jiri ends up coming back. So while he has been knocked out twice by Pereira, Pereira's also the only guy to knock him out in the UFC too. Can Jamahal Hill do that? We'll have to see, right? That's a big question. The other thing as well is this damage going to add up to Jiri with the fact he does get hit a lot, right? Like if you go look at Jiri's stats, curious to see what his striking defense is. It can't be that good, at least from the eye test. Let's go have a quick look right now. So if you look at the eye test here, Jiri's striking defense is at 39%, so that's not very good. So he does get hit a lot. So that's one thing to consider in this matchup. Now on the flip side with Jamahal Hill, obviously coming off that loss to Alex Pereira, the optics of it weren't very good. He came back, he gets finished in the very first round, but let's also not forget Jamal was coming off a major injury and a huge layoff. He beat Glover in January of 2023, fights Alex Pereira in April of 2024. So long layoff, comes back in, gets stopped there. And then he was supposed to fight, have a quick turnaround against Cleo Roundtree and Carlos Ulberg. He ends up getting injured and having to withdraw from that as well. So he'll be fighting again in January. Some concerns with Hill are obviously the injuries have mounted up and the fact that, again, he hasn't been that active, whereas Yuri's been more active. But that's also worked against Jiri because he's lost, he's taken some damage. So that's sort of the big question here. Now, I'm going to say it right now, and I think this is a very, big sort of narrative going into this fight. There are fans out there that hate Jamahal Hill for everything that he's done since the Pereira loss, the way he trolls fans, all that different stuff. This is going to be a classic example of where people are going to not like a fighter and not look at what they've accomplished. One of the things I keep hearing is how Jamahal Hill's overrated. Meanwhile, he dominates Glover Teixeira in that fight. Yes, he doesn't finish him. Jiri Prochazka beats Glover Teixeira a year earlier, does finish him, but people act like he did a much better job in that fight when the reality is Jamahal actually dominated Glover that entire fight. Whereas Jiri was almost on his way to losing that and to some degree gets a bit of a Hail Mary finish there. So again, it's not the be all end all. MMA math doesn't always work, but that's just one example of how fans are discrediting Jamahal Hill. Like prior to that, finishing Thiago Santos. I know Santos hasn't done a whole lot since then. Johnny Walker. I know Johnny Walker hasn't done a whole lot since then, but their finishes, that's the big thing here. Jamahal Hill's going out there and finishing a lot of these guys for the most part. And, again, I think Jamahal, like if I was to cap this fight right now, I would favor Jamahal Hill because of the defense. Because if you look at Jiri, Jamahal Hill gets hit way more than, Jamahal Hill gets hit way less. Well, let's go look at the stats here to back this up. Jamahal Hill gets hit way less than Jiri does. I mentioned it there, 39%. Jamahal Hill, 46%. So that's a better, category in terms of him getting hit as opposed to Jiri. So that's a big liability in this fight, in my opinion. So that's where I think things are going to get interesting. As far as the odds, like I said, I would go Hill as a slight favorite at like -150. I guarantee you Yuri's going to be the favorite here because of what I just mentioned. There's people that don't like Hill. There's people that, and I'm sure the bookies are looking at this too and going, look, people want Jiri to win this fight, so people are therefore going to bet him. I bet Hill's going to be an underdog, and if he is an underdog, you're getting some good value there because this is a 50-50 fight. I don't think it's clear one way or the other. You're going to get fans in the comments of this, I already know it, that are going to say, Yuri's going to destroy Jamahal Hill because Jamahal Hill sucks because he lost Alex Pereira. People are going to say that, but the fact of the matter is you got to look at the context there. Hill coming off a long layoff going into that fight. It was kind of weird with the ref stoppage. I'm not saying that's the reason that Hill lost. I think Pereira still would have beat Hill that night, but you can't act like that wasn't a factor in the stoppage as well, where Hill has to restart and maybe not thinking straight, and then Pereira catches him and takes him down. So that's again something that fans will not look at. So again, I think this is going to be a great fight to bet on if you're on the Jamahal Hill side, because again, there will be people who don't like him and they're going to bet the Jiri side, and I think people are going to totally discredit what Jamal's done. And I think that's a very bad way of analyzing fights. You got to separate the personal from the skill set. People do this with Ian Gary as well. Ian Gary sucks and all that, but Ian Gary's been winning a lot of his fights right at the time of recording this. So anyways, my official pick's going to be Jamahal Hill. I'm going to take him in the second round. Yuri's been knocked out a bunch of times in the second round, like we saw against Pereira. I do think Jamahal has the power to knock out Jiri Prochazka, and I think Jamal's able to survive whatever early onslaught Jiri has, but I think Jamahal is, I just think he's the better fighter, and I might be wrong about this, guys, but right now my early prediction is Jamahal Hill by second round knockout. This is not my official pick. I will do an early look preview of this where I dig deep into the stats and everything else, and I'll do a full-length video on this, but my initial thoughts when I saw this fight get booked is Jamal's got better defense. He won't get hit as much. Jiri will get finished. Would also not shock me either if this fight goes the distance. I know that sounds crazy too, but Jiri is pretty durable overall. And if Jamal can't finish him because it's 3 rounds, I could see this fight potentially hitting the scorecards as well. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. 3 things. First thing, was this the fight to make? Or should they have gone a different direction with both fighters? Second thing, what is your early prediction? And third, do you agree with me that people not liking a fighter blinds them sometimes to how good a fighter is? Like again, if you have this inherent bias that, oh, I hate this guy, that's going to make you not look at some of the good things that they're doing when it comes to analyzing fights. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.